Welcome to a video on HelloID provisioning. This time I'd like to do some target account mapping. Let's see how we configure, how we properly configure some AD attributes. Let's move into target systems and then the on-premise Active Directory account and then configure. At this, you'll get a preview a dialog here, and in the preview you can, let me bring up myself. In the preview you can generate an overview of all the AD attributes that will be generated when an account is created by HelloID Provisioning. And as you can see, this is fairly extensive here. We've even included some custom attributes, like as you see here, extension attribute 4, which is which is a custom attribute. And custom attributes are not listed by default in this dropdown here. So this dropdown only lists the most commonly used attributes, as you will find on the general tab in your AD users and computers, and on the organization tab and the telephones probably. Well, if you have a custom attribute that you want to set as well, you can just do extension attribute 3, for instance, and then not do enter or anything, or just click add here, and then you'll see it gets added, and then you can map it. And then you can say I want either a fixed value, and then you'll see the preview here, or you want it mapped to a field, and then you have all your fields from your HelloID person, obviously. Or you can opt for a complex, and now you can do JavaScript. And as you can see, I don't have any JavaScript here, so it will error out. You can then basically just do this, and it will be an empty string here. Now, let me give you some examples on how to map properly. This field, you don't map that here. You configure that in the administration tab of the target system. So don't do that here. And as you can see, a special one is that proxy addresses. That's a multi-value field, because you can have multiple addresses where there's always one with capital SMTP, which is the primary address, and the rest is then lowercase SMTP or X500 if you need that kind of stuff. Now let me give you some examples on how to JavaScript. We do ECMA script 2011, so it's a fairly basic JavaScript implementation. Most of the regular functions like substring and the normal string manipulation stuff is already in there. So for instance, UPN, which is a fairly important one. And then there are certain things that that you may wonder about. For instance, this one, the suffix and the iteration. I'll come to that in a bit. And then you'll see here, well, the usual stuff of string manipulation, lowercase, regular expression to replace blank characters. This one is a special function that HelloID sort of injects into the JavaScript runtime to convert diacritical marks into their corresponding ASCII characters. That's for mostly used in foreign languages, for instance. And yeah, it's not really any spectacular stuff going on here. The only thing that happens is the iteration. The iteration is a special reserved keyword or variable, as you would, that is automatically managed by HelloID. So every time this function is called or is executed, this one increments in steps of 1. So whenever this function is called initially, it will be 0. So this thing will be 0, and the iteration will be, or the suffix will be empty as a consequence of this ternary operator. This is what you see here is more like a one-liner for an if then else, which is called a ternary operator. So it says if this is 1, then it's an empty string, else it's going to be the iterator itself. So the suffix is either empty or it's going to be number 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. Now, if you want to test this out, obviously you can overrule it. So you can say iteration is 0, and well, it was already 0, so it won't do anything. But watch this space here for the user principal name. Where is it? It's this one. So if I increment the iterator, it will be something else. You see, an extra letter will be added and the number will be added. And if you do it here, 2, and then this is, yeah, you see, okay, extra letters will be added. Sometimes you have to wait a little bit for this to debounce and make sure you see the exact execution and the status appear here. So this is how you can test it, the iteration. Now this iteration is automatically called because this toggle here is enabled. And so when the account is created as a result of a business rule, and then you get a grant of an account, and HelloID creates an account, this mapping is executed. These functions are executed. Now, whenever a duplicate is found, so this user principal name is already occupied, is already used in Active Directory, then because this toggle here is enabled, the function will be called again with iteration is 1. And if that's okay, then that value is used. If not, it will be iteration is 2. So that automatically increments every time. And then you can use that in all kinds of logic to not only do a number here, but you can also say if the iteration is like 2 or 3 or greater than 3 or whatever, you can do different things. You can like substring this name to its first character. You can see that kind of here. You can substring here, and you can trim to make sure that leading and trailing spaces are removed. So if you Google around and you look on Stack Overflow, you can find massive amounts of examples on how to do this, and then you can build your own complex naming algorithm. Now, for some examples, we've put together a series of algorithms in the helper functions, and then you go to JavaScript, and then you have your algorithms. And then, for instance, the use principal name, if you look at that, this is more or less a default on the use principal name. You can see most of the stuff. And if you go for a display name, this one has an interesting switch, because in this case we're using the person's name convention, which is usually a code like a letter or a digit, which comes from the HR system, and that says, or it impacts the sequence of names to use, because you can have a partner name, you can have your own birth name, and in what kind of sequence would you like to use those name parts. Now, the HR systems have a different convention for all these kinds of codes, and in HelloID, in the person document, we do B for birth and P for partner, and then obviously this is the birth and the partner name, and this is the partner and then the birth name. So you have your 4 different conventions. And then we do a JavaScript switch to basically just do a more neatly organized if then else to format the name based on the convention as listed in the person. Now, if you want to extract this one, you just do raw, and then you can copy everything, right? Now, also some functions maybe on the proxy addresses. The proxy addresses has the same kind of convention, and then here we also say it's being returned as an array. And because it's returned as an array, you will see in HelloID this. It will automatically detect that it's an array, and it will do it like that. So that's your basic account mapping with the preview, iteration testing. Yeah, make sure that this is all configured properly. Also, make sure that the initials is maxed to 6 characters for Active Directory because the field in AD won't allow more, and that this field is maxed to 20 characters because of old NetBIOS compatibility. Active Directory doesn't allow for more. I believe this one will allow for 64, but usually you won't end up uh, that much. Also make sure that you always do this, which is used for the correlation. If you have configured it to use employee ID or either employee number, but make sure you include the person's external ID, usually a number. In my case, this is a string, as the correlation field. Make sure to incorporate that as well. All right, I think that's it for now for the basic account mapping. Thanks for watching.